Where will Bitcoin drop down to in the bear market? If I were to guess, I would say somewhere around $30,000. I could see it going below $30,000. I could actually see it going much below $30,000. But before I give you my reasoning, I do want to tell you that there are a variety of opinions on this matter, and it seems like there's a consensus that most people think Bitcoin's going to go down somewhere around $50,000 to $60,000. And the big reason why most people think that is because we spent so long in that range in 2024, just ranging between $50,000 and $70,000, that we built up a lot of support at that level. And then we bounced higher. And I think there's a compelling case to be made for that. I would not object to buying Bitcoin at $50,000 or $60,000. I just think it's actually going to go lower than that for a major specific reason. But before all that, here's the deal. There are a lot of people who think that Bitcoin is going to go much higher first. And so what you'll hear from a lot of people is that by the end of 2025, you will see Bitcoin around $200,000. Some would say $300,000, $500,000. I even know of somebody who has a $600,000 price prediction for November of 2025. And so how amazing would that be if that were the case? I mean, that's more than a 6x in Bitcoin right now. How much more so for altcoins? I disagree. I actually think I've been on record saying that I think the end of 2025 is going to be a bottoming out point, maybe early 2026. And then after that is going to be a phenomenal buying opportunity. And whatever Bitcoin peaks at in 2025, it's going to go much higher than that during the time that we would typically think it's the bear market, something like 2026 or 2027. I think the all-time high for this cycle is closer to the next Bitcoin halving than it is for the previous Bitcoin halving. Now, that doesn't mean we're done for this cycle. That doesn't mean that we're done for 2025. We can go higher in 2025. But I think the conditions are going to be a lot better in terms of interest rates, in terms of monetary policy, somewhere around 2026 or 2027. So what happens before then? That's the question. And that's where I land on $30,000, maybe by the end of 2025 or early 2026. Or lower than that. And the big reason why is because, I've said this again, I know most of you know where I'm going with this, that I believe we are entering a recession in 2025. So we've seen some weakening across the markets. We've seen some weakening in the S&P 500 and in the NASDAQ. I'm not entirely convinced that the peak is behind us for the S&P and the NASDAQ. It is very plausible that the peak is behind us. The NASDAQ in particular is looking very weak. And why am I talking about stocks when I'm talking about Bitcoin in this video? Well, it matters. It matters a great deal, actually, because this idea that Bitcoin and crypto would thrive as one of the most risk-on things that you could purchase when the S&P and the NASDAQ are not thriving, that's a concept that I can't even envision. I can't entertain that possibility. We need the stock market to be doing well, and if the stock market's doing poorly, then crypto is going to follow suit. And so we enter a recession that most likely means a fairly decent or significant drop in stock prices. And if we have a significant drop in stock prices, we're probably going to have a significant drop in crypto as well. What kind of a drop would there be for the NASDAQ or the S&P 500? I don't know. I'm pretty agnostic about that. But the last time we had a recession, not including the COVID crash, it was the great financial crisis of 2008. And the stock market dropped more than 60%. The Dow Jones did. The NASDAQ dropped more than that. And if the stock market were to drop more than 60% this time around, which I'm not willing to say that, but even if it were to drop 40%, that would probably mean a more significant drop. Not probably, that would definitely mean a more significant drop for Bitcoin. I do want to remind you, Bitcoin has never truly existed in a recession. Now, there was a very minor recession during the COVID crash in 2020, but then what happened? The United States government, quantitative easing, stimulus, lots of printing of fiat currencies all around the world. So I don't really count that. But other than that, Bitcoin has never actually existed in a recession. Cryptocurrencies have never actually existed in a recession. And so we have this template for what we think a bear market would look like, where perhaps Bitcoin would peak at whatever price it peaks at and then drop 70% or 80%. It's historically dropped between 70 and 80% from its bull run peak to its bear market bottom. And that's what should happen this time around. Well, if $108,000 was the peak, a 70% drop would be a little under $40,000. But if we go higher, of course, if we went to $200,000, that would mean that 70% drop would be $60,000, which is much more in line with where a lot of people are projecting. But that's in a bear market for crypto when we're not in a recession in the United States. So I could honestly see there being a scenario where Bitcoin would drop by more this time around than in previous bear markets, more than 80%. Dare I say 90%, a 90% drop in Bitcoin. Now I know the objections. I know the objections. Alex, we have so much bullishness now. We have the spot Bitcoin ETFs. We have institutions. We have the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. We have nation states buying Bitcoin. All right, here's from my experience as an investor. I have come to find that the economy always wins. If it's a good economy, things will thrive. And if it's a bad economy, things will dump. And even with all the bullish catalysts, maybe that will prop us up a little bit better. And so maybe it all just equalizes out and we do have just only a 70 or 80% drop. But I tend to think that no, we would have a more significant drop than that, because economic factors, all right, am I biased? I was an economics major in college. Economic factors tend to win out over externals like a Bitcoin strategic reserve or like a spot Bitcoin ETF. We saw the gold ETF have significant effects on the price of gold in the aughts. And so, sure, yes, the spot Bitcoin ETFs should also have a significant effect on Bitcoin in the 20s and in the 30s. But, it's a matter of perspective, because I'm just talking about 2025 into 2026. We go further than that. I'm telling you guys, I'm a mega bull, because what happens during a recession? Well, we got to get out of this recession. We got to do everything we can to get out of this recession. And so what's that mean? Rates to zero, quantitative easing, money printing out the wazoo, M2 money supply just going straight up in a line. I think that would be very likely in the event of a recession. So personally, I am wondering if it would be a pretty short recession, not as short as the COVID crash, but a short recession. And then, like I'm saying, new all-time highs in 2026 and or 2027, because that's when things are going to be primed for a big bull run. So if I'm right about this, I could be wrong. I fully admit I could be wrong. Are you willing to wait? Are you maybe there's money to be made short term. I think there's money to be made short term. But will you be willing to ride this out? Because wealth transfers from the impatient to the patient. That's a Warren Buffett statement. And if you were willing to be patient and not thinking Lambo in 2025, then I think you could be well positioned to take advantage of the buying opportunity of the decade. But pain first. Fun first, a little bit of fun first, and then pain. And then the buying opportunity of the decade, which is in really when millionaires will be made and risk-on activity is going to be insane. But what do I know, man? Nobody knows. I'm just picturing the objections in my head. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You're all just speculating. Okay. Well, that's all I have for today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and the rest of your week. Peace.